In 1854, a crowd gathered inside New York's Crystal Palace to watch a man risk his life on an open platform suspended above the floor. His name was Elisha Graves Otis. The platform rose slowly into the air, supported by a single rope. Then, at Otis's signal, an assistant cut it. For one terrifying moment, the platform dropped. The crowd expected to see a man fall to his death, but after only a few inches, the platform stopped. A hidden safety mechanism had locked it against the guide rails. All safe, Otis reportedly declared. That brief demonstration did not invent the elevator. Humans had been lifting stone, cargo, and workers for centuries. What Otis demonstrated was something far more important. A broken rope no longer had to mean disaster, and that changed the future of cities. Before safe passenger elevators, height was a punishment. Every additional floor meant more stairs, more exhaustion, and less valuable space. The highest rooms were often the least desirable, but once people could rise without climbing and trust that they would not fall, upper floors became practical, profitable, and eventually prestigious. The elevator did more than carry people upward. It transformed empty air above city streets into valuable real estate. And without it, the modern skyscraper could never have existed. If stories about the hidden inventions that built the modern world fascinate you, like this video and subscribe. Because before elevators could create skyscrapers, they first had to conquer fear. The strange thing is, Elisha Otis did not invent the elevator. Long before his dramatic demonstration in New York, human beings had already found ways to lift heavy objects above the ground. Builders used ropes, pulleys, and wooden platforms to raise stone. Miners traveled through shafts in crude lifting cages. Warehouses relied on hoists to move grain, tools, and merchandise between floors. By the early 19th century, factories were already experimenting with powered lifts driven by steam or hydraulic pressure. The basic idea was not revolutionary. Attach a platform to a rope, connect the rope to a drum or pulley, apply power, raise the platform. For cargo, that was often enough. A crate of fabric could not feel fear. A barrel of grain did not look down into the darkness beneath it. If a freight platform shook, lurched, or stopped suddenly, the merchandise could still be delivered. People were different. To carry passengers, an elevator had to do far more than rise. It had to start smoothly, stop accurately, and remain stable as people stepped in and out. Most importantly, passengers had to believe that the machine would not send them crashing to the bottom of the shaft. That was the real obstacle. The elevator's greatest challenge was not gravity. It was trust. A building owner could install the most advanced lifting machine in the world, but it meant nothing if tenants preferred the stairs. A hotel could advertise effortless travel between floors, but guests would refuse if the journey felt like entering a suspended trap. Otis's safety mechanism attacked that fear directly. He did not promise that ropes would never wear out. He did not claim that machinery could never fail. Instead, he demonstrated that one of the most terrifying failures, a broken lifting rope, did not have to become a fatal fall. That distinction would change everything. Because the machine that made skyscrapers possible was not simply the first elevator capable of lifting people, it was the first elevator ordinary people could begin to imagine trusting. And before cities could rise into the clouds, that trust had to defeat something far older and more familiar than any machine. The staircase. Imagine entering an office building in the middle of the 19th century. There is no button to press, no bell announcing an arriving car, no metal doors sliding open. There are only stairs. The first flight is easy. The second requires more effort. By the third, you are breathing harder. By the fourth, your pace has slowed. If you are carrying a parcel, wearing heavy clothing, or visiting several times a day, the climb becomes more than an inconvenience. It becomes part of the cost of doing business. For a healthy young worker, several flights of stairs might be tiring. For an elderly customer, a person with limited mobility, or someone carrying heavy goods, the upper floors could be nearly unreachable. This placed a natural limit on buildings. Architects could design another story. Builders could construct it. Property owners could offer it for rent. But people still had to reach it. In many buildings, the most convenient spaces were closest to the street. Customers could enter quickly. Deliveries could arrive with less effort. Business owners could be seen from the pavement. The higher a tenant moved, the more inconvenience they accepted. Upper rooms were often cheaper because every visit demanded a climb. They might receive more daylight and escape some of the noise below, but those advantages were balanced by the exhausting journey. Height was not yet a symbol of prestige. It was a penalty. This created a frustrating contradiction for urban property owners. Land in busy commercial districts was limited and increasingly expensive. The obvious solution was to build upward. Each additional floor could create more offices, hotel rooms, workshops, or retail space without requiring a larger plot of land. But every floor added above the street became harder to use. A developer could make a building taller, but not necessarily more valuable. The structure might contain additional rooms while attracting fewer tenants willing to occupy them. The human body had become an architectural limit. No matter how ambitious the architect or how valuable the land, the practical height of a busy building was determined by how many stairs an ordinary person was willing to climb. This was especially important as cities became more crowded. Businesses wanted to remain near banks, railway terminals, government offices, and commercial exchanges. Workers needed to arrive in large numbers. Companies wanted impressive addresses close to the center of economic activity. Horizontal space was running out. The unused opportunity was above them. But as long as every additional floor demanded additional physical effort, the sky remained difficult to sell. Builders did not merely need a machine that could lift people. They needed one that could make height feel effortless. And machines capable of lifting passengers already existed. The problem was that stepping onto one could feel like placing your life in the hands of a rope. Early lifting platforms were useful, but they were not comforting. A passenger could see the rope disappearing above the platform. Beneath their feet was a shaft extending toward the ground. The machinery might creak. The platform could shake. Nothing about the experience felt ordinary. And the danger was easy to understand. If the supporting rope failed, gravity would take control. This made passenger elevators fundamentally different from many other new inventions. A steam engine could appear complicated, but its passengers usually remained on solid ground. A railway carriage moved horizontally along visible tracks. An elevator asked people to stand inside a box, suspended over empty space. The fear was immediate. Otis's solution was designed around that exact moment of failure. The elevator car moved between two vertical guide rails. While the lifting rope remained tight, the safety mechanism stayed in its normal position and the platform could travel freely. But if the rope broke or suddenly lost tension, powerful springs forced metal catches outward. Those catches gripped the guide rails and stopped the platform from continuing its fall. The brilliance of the system was not that it prevented every mechanical problem. It separated rope failure from catastrophe. A rope could snap, yet the platform could remain trapped securely inside the shaft. Otis understood that explaining this mechanism would not be enough. He could produce drawings. He could describe the springs and catches. He could tell building owners that the design was reliable. But the public did not need another promise. They needed to see the failure happen. That was why the Crystal Palace demonstration mattered. The rope was not hidden behind machinery. It was cut in front of the crowd. The platform visibly dropped. The danger was allowed to begin. Then the safety device stopped it. In only a few seconds, Otis transformed an abstract engineering claim into a spectacle anyone could understand. The crowd did not need to calculate the force placed on the guide rails. They did not need to study the design. They watched the rope fail, and they watched the man survive. The demonstration turned safety into something visible. It showed that an elevator did not have to depend entirely on a perfect rope, a perfect operator, or a machine that never malfunctioned. there could be a second line of defense. That principle remains central to elevator safety today. Modern systems use multiple protective measures, but the underlying philosophy is similar. No single failure should automatically cause an uncontrolled fall. The demonstration made Otis famous. Orders for his lifting equipment increased, and his name became closely connected with elevator safety. But there was still an enormous difference between watching a fearless inventor stand on an exhibition platform and entering an elevator yourself. At the Crystal Palace, the danger belonged to Otis. Inside a passenger elevator, it would belong to everyone. The next step was not another dramatic performance. It was convincing ordinary customers to close the doors and leave the ground behind. In March 1857, a new kind of experience appeared inside the E.V. Hawout building on Broadway in New York City. The building housed a fashionable department store filled with expensive glassware, silver, and decorative goods. Customers could walk through several floors of merchandise, but now they did not have to climb to reach them. An Otis passenger elevator had been installed inside the building. It was not the first machine in history to carry a person upward, but it became one of the earliest successful passenger elevators placed into regular commercial service. For the customer approaching it, the experience must have felt unfamiliar. There were no decades of public trust behind the technology. No childhood memory of elevators in apartment buildings or hotels. No assumption that stepping into a moving room was a normal part of daily life. A passenger entered a small platform or car. An operator controlled the mechanism. The building seemed to move around them as the street level disappeared below. The journey was not especially fast by modern standards, but speed was not the main attraction. The extraordinary promise was that a customer could move between floors without effort. This changed the meaning of the building. Before the elevator, each story placed another barrier between the merchandise and the customer. Retailers could display goods upstairs, but every additional flight of stairs discouraged someone from seeing them. The elevator turned those upper floors into accessible commercial space. A department store could become a vertical street, with different products arranged above one another instead of spread across a much larger area. The machine also provided something less practical, but equally valuable: spectacle. Riding an elevator was an attraction. The movement itself could draw curious visitors. A retailer installing one was not simply improving transportation. It was presenting the business as modern, sophisticated, and technologically advanced. Yet novelty alone could not create the skyscraper. For elevators to reshape cities, passengers had to stop thinking of them as exhibitions. The machine needed to become routine. That transformation happened gradually. Hotel guests began using elevators to reach rooms that would once have demanded tiring climbs. Shoppers traveled between departments. Visitors entered public buildings and discovered that height no longer required physical effort. With every successful journey, the fear weakened. Passengers stepped inside. The car rose. The doors opened. Nothing terrible happened. Then it happened again. Trust was not created by one demonstration alone. It was built through thousands of ordinary trips. This was the true victory of Otis's safety system. It did not merely stop a platform during a public spectacle. It allowed the elevator to enter daily life. People began to accept that a machine could carry them upward safely, but department stores and hotels were only the beginning. The larger prize was the office building, because once thousands of workers could be moved vertically every morning, height would no longer be an architectural experiment. It would become a business model. By the decades after the Civil War, American cities were growing rapidly. Businesses wanted offices close to financial districts, railway connections, courts, newspapers, and customers. The most desirable streets became increasingly crowded, and land prices continued to rise. For property owners, the solution seemed obvious. If the land could not spread outward, the building could rise upward. But the old contradiction remained. Additional floors only produced additional profit when tenants were willing to occupy them. The passenger elevator changed that calculation. In 1870, the Equitable Life Assurance Society completed a new office building in Lower Manhattan. It became one of the important early examples of a commercial office building planned around passenger elevators. This was a major shift. An elevator inside a shop helped customers browse. An elevator inside a hotel helped guests reach their rooms. An elevator inside an office building reorganized the working city. Now hundreds of employees could enter at street level and be distributed to offices above. Lawyers, accountants, insurance clerks, and business executives no longer needed to remain within a few easy flights of the pavement. The elevator turned vertical distance into travel time. Instead of asking whether a worker could physically climb to the 7th floor several times a day, a developer could ask how quickly an elevator could deliver them there. That change made each additional floor more commercially useful. A fixed city lot could hold more tenants. More tenants meant more rent. The same piece of land could produce far greater income simply by extending higher into the air. For developers, the empty space above the roof became valuable. But the elevator did more than make upper floors usable. It began reversing their social status. Before elevators, a high room could mean isolation and inconvenience. After elevators, height offered advantages that the street could not provide. Upper floors received more daylight. They were farther from mud, traffic, animals, crowds, and noise. As cities became denser and more polluted, distance above the street began to feel desirable. Eventually, the highest floors could become the most prestigious spaces in a building. The exhausting climb that had once reduced their value had disappeared. This was one of the elevator's most important consequences. It did not merely help people reach an existing destination. It changed which destinations people wanted. Architects and developers began thinking differently. Buildings no longer had to organize their most important rooms near the ground. Businesses could occupy entire towers. Hotels could charge more for elevated views. Apartment residents could live far above the streets while still reaching their homes within minutes. The elevator had defeated the practical limit imposed by human stamina. But this did not mean skyscrapers could immediately rise without restriction. A new problem appeared. Traditional masonry buildings carried enormous weight through their exterior walls. The taller the building became, the thicker those walls often needed to be, especially near the base. At some point, the walls required to support the structure could consume too much valuable interior space. The elevator had removed the human limit. Now engineers had to remove the structural one. The elevator had solved one of architecture's oldest problems. People could now reach the upper floors without exhausting themselves. But a building could not rise simply because passengers were willing to enter it. The structure itself still had to carry the weight. For centuries, large buildings depended heavily on thick masonry walls made from stone or brick. Those walls did more than enclose the rooms. They supported much of the building above them. As a masonry building grew taller, the walls near its base had to carry greater loads. That often meant making them thicker. At lower levels, enormous sections of valuable floor space could disappear inside structural walls. Windows became more difficult to arrange. Interior rooms lost light. The building became heavier, more expensive, and increasingly inefficient. The elevator had created a reason to build higher. Traditional construction methods still made height difficult. The breakthrough came through iron and later steel framing. Instead of asking the exterior walls to carry nearly everything, engineers began creating internal skeletons of metal columns and beams. The building's weight could travel through this frame and down toward the foundations. The walls no longer had to become massive blocks of supporting masonry. They could function more like a skin attached to the structure. This changed what architects could imagine. A metal frame could support greater height while leaving more room for windows, offices, and rentable space. Buildings could become taller without their lower floors being swallowed by walls. But the frame alone was not enough. A tall structure with no practical way to reach its upper levels would still be commercially useless. The elevator and the metal frame solved two different problems. The frame allowed the building to stand. The elevator allowed the building to function. Together, they helped create a new architectural form. Historians continue to debate Which early building deserves to be called the first true skyscraper? Some point to developments in Chicago. Others emphasize earlier tall office buildings in New York. But the skyscraper was not born in a single moment. It emerged gradually as several technologies came together: stronger metal structures, improved foundations, fire-resistant construction, electric lighting, reliable water systems, and safe passenger elevators. No single inventor created the modern skyline alone. Yet without vertical transportation, most of those innovations would have produced tall shells with inaccessible rooms. The elevator gave the upper floors economic purpose. It transformed height from an engineering achievement into usable property. Once developers understood that, the question changed. They no longer asked whether a building could rise. They asked how much money could be made by sending it higher. And as buildings grew, the elevators inside them would need to become faster, smoother, and far more powerful. The earliest powered elevators were not electric. Many relied on steam engines, often connected to drums that wound or unwound lifting ropes. Others used hydraulic systems. A hydraulic elevator could move a car by forcing water into a cylinder beneath it. The pressure pushed a piston upward, raising the platform. These machines could provide smooth and powerful movement. But they also had limitations. Some required deep underground cylinders extending nearly as far below the building as the elevator traveled above it. That became increasingly impractical as structures grew taller. Steam equipment required space, fuel, and maintenance. Hydraulic systems depended on substantial water infrastructure. If elevators were going to serve the next generation of tall buildings, they needed a more flexible source of power. Electricity provided it. Early electric elevators appeared during the late 19th century. As motors improved, engineers gained far more control over speed, stopping, and direction. The elevator could accelerate more smoothly. It could stop more precisely at each floor. Its machinery could be arranged more efficiently inside the building. Electric power also helped elevators become faster, but simply attaching a motor to a heavy car was not enough. Lifting the entire weight of a loaded elevator directly would require enormous energy. The answer was balance. In a traction elevator, steel ropes connect the car to a counterweight. Those ropes pass over a rotating wheel known as a sheave. The counterweight balances much of the elevator car's mass. The motor does not have to lift the full weight from nothing. It mainly moves the difference between the two sides. When the car rises, the counterweight descends. When the car descends, the counterweight rises. This makes the system more efficient and better suited to tall buildings. By the early 20th century, gearless traction elevators could travel rapidly through increasingly high towers. Their design became fundamental to modern high-rise transportation. The change was not merely mechanical. Faster elevators altered what people considered an acceptable distance above the street. A slow lift might make the 10th floor practical. A faster one could make the 20th or 30th feel almost as convenient. The height of a building was no longer measured only in feet. It was measured in waiting time. A tenant might accept an office far above the pavement if the journey lasted less than a minute. But if the lobby was crowded and the ride stopped at every floor, the tower could still feel inconvenient. This created a new problem. The elevator had made greater height possible. Greater height now threatened to overwhelm the elevator. A small building may need only one or two elevators. A skyscraper may require an entire system. Every morning, thousands of workers can arrive within a short period. They enter through the same lobby, but their destinations may be separated by dozens of floors. If every elevator stopped everywhere, the result would be painfully slow. Cars would fill at the bottom, stop repeatedly, and spend most of their time opening and closing doors. Adding more elevators seems like the obvious solution. But every additional shaft consumes space. That space cannot be used for offices, hotel rooms, or apartments. This creates one of the great contradictions of high-rise design. A skyscraper needs elevators to make its upper floors profitable. But too many elevator shafts reduce the amount of profitable floor space. Engineers had to turn elevators into a carefully organized transportation network. One solution was zoning. Some cars served only lower floors. Others traveled to the middle or upper sections. An express elevator could pass several floors without stopping, carrying passengers quickly to a different zone. In extremely tall towers, architects introduced transfer levels known as sky lobbies. Passengers could ride an express elevator to a sky lobby and then change to a local car serving a smaller group of floors. The system worked much like a railway. An express train carries passengers quickly across a long distance. A local train handles the shorter stops. Inside a skyscraper, the same logic is turned vertically. The original World Trade Center towers used sky lobbies to reduce the number of shafts required throughout the buildings. Express cars carried passengers to transfer levels, where they entered local elevator groups for the remaining journey. Modern systems have gone further. Computerized controls analyze demand, group passengers, and decide which car should answer each request. In some buildings, passengers select their destination before entering. The system directs people traveling to similar floors into the same car. This reduces unnecessary stops. The passenger experiences a simple instruction: enter this elevator. Behind that instruction is a constant calculation involving location, direction, capacity, and expected demand. The elevator had begun as a platform pulled by a rope. It had become a hidden public transport system operating inside a building. And as that system improved, skyscrapers could hold populations comparable to small towns. Thousands of people could arrive, move, work, and leave without ever thinking about the machinery coordinating them. That invisibility was a sign of success. The elevator was becoming so reliable that people stopped experiencing it as an invention. They began experiencing it as part of the building itself. The elevator transformed more than architecture. It changed the way people lived, worked, and understood social status. Before reliable passenger elevators, the most desirable rooms were often those closest to the ground. The lower floors were easier to reach. The upper rooms demanded effort. Elevators reversed that hierarchy. Once the climb disappeared, height offered advantages. Upper floors received more sunlight. They escaped some of the noise, dust, and congestion of the street. They offered wider views. In hotels and apartment buildings, the highest levels could become the most expensive. The attic had once belonged to servants, storage, or poorer tenants. The penthouse became a symbol of wealth. That social reversal would have been impossible without mechanical access. Elevators also changed the department store. Retailers could divide merchandise across several floors while still encouraging customers to explore the entire building. They transformed hotels by allowing guests to reach rooms far above the lobby. They supported large hospitals, apartment towers, and office complexes. They helped concentrate thousands of employees inside urban business districts. The elevator also created a new kind of social space. Inside the car, strangers stand unusually close together. They face the same direction. They avoid prolonged eye contact. Conversations become shorter or disappear completely. For a few seconds, people of different professions, incomes, and backgrounds share a small moving room. In the early years, an operator controlled that experience. The operator opened and closed the doors, started the car, and aligned it with each floor. A skilled operator could stop smoothly and accurately. For many passengers, that human presence provided reassurance. The operator represented control inside a machine that still felt unfamiliar. Eventually, automatic doors and push-button controls reduced the need for operators, but automation created another period of resistance. Some passengers distrusted the idea of traveling without a person at the controls. They were accustomed to seeing someone responsible for the journey. Over time, the buttons became familiar. The operator disappeared. The elevator became something people controlled themselves without thinking. This may have been its deepest cultural achievement. Elevators taught entire populations to accept vertical movement as ordinary. A person could enter a small enclosed room at street level and emerge hundreds of feet above the ground without feeling that anything extraordinary had happened. Height had been domesticated, but the more ordinary elevators became, the more dangerous their absence could be. A skyscraper may appear solid and permanent, yet its daily life depends on movement. People must reach offices, food must reach restaurants, linen must reach hotel rooms, equipment must be delivered, waste must be removed, emergency services must move through the building. Without elevators, the upper floors do not disappear. They simply become difficult to use. A breakdown that would be a minor inconvenience in a two-story building can disrupt the lives of hundreds or thousands of people inside a tower. Residents may face long climbs. Workers can arrive late. Deliveries slow down. People with limited mobility may lose practical access entirely. The skyscraper's dependence on elevators reveals an important truth. The machine is not an accessory added after the architecture is complete. It is part of the architecture's basic function. That dependence affects the design of nearly every tall building. Architects must decide how many elevator cars are required, how quickly must they travel, how many people will arrive during the busiest period, how much space can the shafts consume, where should passengers transfer, how will service elevators remain separate from public traffic. These decisions influence the building's width, core, entrances, and rentable area. The higher the tower rises, the more complicated the calculation becomes. Elevator shafts run continuously through the building, taking space from every floor. The machine that makes the upper floors valuable also removes some of the space that could generate income. Designers therefore search for ways to move more people through fewer shafts. Faster cars help. Smarter controls help. Sky lobbies help. Double-deck elevators, with two connected cars serving adjacent floors, can increase capacity. Every improvement attempts to solve the same problem. How can a building send more people upward without allowing the transportation system to consume the building itself? The skyscraper does not merely contain elevators. It is shaped around them. The visible tower of steel and glass is arranged around an invisible vertical core. That core is the building's circulation system. Without it, the skyline would still be impressive, but much of it would be unusable. Look at the skyline of almost any major city. The most visible features are obvious. Glass walls reflect the sun. Steel frames carry enormous weight. Lights mark the buildings after dark. Architectural shapes compete for attention. But the technology that makes these towers practical is hidden. Behind walls and doors are shafts stretching through the structure. Inside them, cars travel along guide rails. Motors turn. Counterweights move in the opposite direction. Brakes wait for emergencies. Sensors watch the doors. Computers decide which car should move and where it should stop. Most passengers see almost none of it. They press a button, doors open, they step inside. That simple routine represents the solution to a problem that once controlled the height of every busy building. Before elevators, an upper floor carried a physical price. Someone had to climb to reach it. The elevator removed that cost. It turned height into accessible space. Accessible space became rentable space. Rentable space encouraged developers to build higher. That is how an invention hidden inside the building transformed the visible shape of the city. The elevator did not create the skyscraper alone. Steel framing carried the structure. Foundations supported it. Electricity illuminated it. Fireproofing protected it. But the elevator made its height useful. Without vertical transportation, a tower would be an architectural monument with increasingly impractical rooms. With elevators, it could become an office, hotel, hospital, or home for thousands of people. The skyscraper's most important machine is rarely visible from the street, yet every floor above the reach of an ordinary staircase depends upon it. And the transformation began with a platform, a rope, and a public act of controlled failure. In 1854, Elisha Otis stood above a crowd while an assistant cut the rope supporting his platform. The platform did fall, but only a short distance. The safety mechanism caught it, and Otis remained standing. That small drop helped remove a limit that had shaped buildings for centuries. People had always known how to build upward. The greater challenge was making height useful. A room dozens of floors above the street had little value if reaching it required an exhausting climb, or if the machine carrying passengers could not be trusted. Safe elevators solved both problems. They made height reachable. Faster systems made it convenient. Modern control networks made it possible to move entire building populations through the sky. The elevator's true achievement was not simply overcoming gravity. It changed the economic and social meaning of being above the ground. The upper floor stopped being a punishment and became a privilege. Empty air became valuable property. Cities that had once expanded mainly across the land could now grow vertically. Every skyscraper begins with foundations, steel and concrete, but it becomes usable only when a set of ordinary doors opens, closes, and carries someone upward. If this hidden history changed the way you see the skyline, like the video and subscribe, because the modern world was built by ordinary inventions whose greatest stories are still hiding in plain sight.